The Life Coaching Toolbox Podcast is brought to you by Joeel and Natalie Rivera of Transformation Academy. In this episode, Natalie talks about the Human Mind Owner's Manual, a human empowerment story. This episode is one of 11 episodes in a series about CBT and REBT, which are powerful tools for coaching, and together provide a Human Mind Owner's Manual.
Let me tell you the story of REBT, a human empowerment story. They don't teach this stuff in school, and our parents don't know it either. And so we're never told about the superpowers of our minds, or that we have control over how we think, feel, and act. And as a result, we tend to spend our lives feeling like the victim of circumstances, like life happens to us. What we experience in life is determined by the outside world, and we have little to no control over it. Most people believe they're dealt a hand of cards at birth, including the parent card, the community card, the religion and life philosophy card, and a variety of other life circumstances that are outside of their control. Then, throughout their lives, their mission on this earth is to play the cards that they've been dealt. However, as life goes along, additional cards are added to the pile. The being bullied in school card, the breakup with your high school love card, the addiction card, the failing college card, the getting fired card, the car accident card, the children cards, the getting cancer cards. They feel at the mercy of these cards because each card causes them to feel emotions, as well as causes them to act in certain ways. They want desperately to fit in, to be accepted, to be around good people who act appropriately and who love them. They spend most of their time trying to control the world around them in an attempt at meeting their needs. They do this by arguing to get their way, changing their jobs, moving to a new location, putting out the fires, buying the item they believe will finally make them happy. But no matter where they go, it seems their problems follow them. No matter what they do, in the end, they're still unhappy, unfulfilled, and angry. It feels like life is constantly throwing things at them and putting obstacles in their way. Some people react to all of these cards by working frantically to try to control them, to stop more unwanted cards from coming. And other people begin to feel helpless and that they have no hope of feeling in control of their destiny. And so they give away their power and live their lives on autopilot, simply reacting to each new card that comes. You can imagine that as a result, most people are pretty stressed out. This stress leads to a variety of mental and emotional problems, such as anxiety, depression, overwhelm, hopelessness, and even guilt and shame. Most people, ourselves included, have had those experiences where we feel like we just suck at life, like we're failures at being human. And this has always been the case, and many people over the years have sought professional help to cope with their emotional pain and dysfunction. So hundreds of years ago, doctors of the time were smart enough to recognize that the problems people were having were mental illness, and they stemmed from the brain. But they were pretty prehistoric, and they believed that drilling holes in a person's skull and other practices that are too gross to mention here would solve the problem. And obviously, it didn't work. Then, around the turn of the 20th century, a new field of science emerged called psychology. Early psychologists focused on processing emotions through a variety of methods, but mainly talking about the past and how we feel, with the goal of accessing this newly discovered unconscious mind, which is like the programming in the mind that we're not aware of. It was tremendously helpful compared to the previous methods, but it was still time-consuming, unpredictable, and mostly ineffective at creating lasting change. Then behaviorism was the next wave of psychology, and it focused on helping people change their behaviors rather than focusing on how they felt. The person's actions were the focus rather than their inner experience. Both the emotional and behavioral focuses helped, but they both largely ignored the way that people think. And it turns out that they were missing the most important factor to human psychology. So then came Albert Ellis, and he was the first one to dive deeper into human thinking as a factor in emotional and behavioral problems. To most people today, the idea that our thoughts have a significant impact on our life experiences seems like common sense, even if they don't understand how it works exactly. But at the time, it was revolutionary. And the reason it seems like common knowledge today is that this discovery was the biggest shift in the understanding of how the human mind works. And in fact, how human experience of life works. It's the biggest shift ever. This concept has become the focus of all of the most influential major movements in modern psychology. In a nutshell, Albert Ellis taught us that people are not disturbed by things, but rather by their view of things. And knowing this, let's look back at that hand of cards that we've been dealt. While there may be specific situations that life has placed in front of us, the truth that most people do not realize is that it is not what is on the card that impacts how we feel or what we do because of it. Rather, how we perceive what we are dealt is the cause of our emotional reactions. And then our emotional reaction is what determines our behavior. And this can be really hard to accept for many people. Many people have become very attached to the idea that the reason they are angry is because their boss snapped at them. The reason they failed the test is because they spilled coffee on themselves that morning. And then they were late to school. And then their teacher handed them a paper and they received a D on it. And they got it just before test time. And after all that, of course they were anxious. Who wouldn't be, right? And then, they're probably already a poor test taker. So under these conditions, with these cards that they were dealt, it obviously would lead to failing the test, right? Well, the truth is, however hard it might be to hear, that it's wrong. None of those reasons is why they failed the test. First, they may have failed the test in part because they did not study and were unprepared. But more than anything, they failed the test because they did not know how to direct their own thoughts and control their emotions. The truth is that they could have had a better way of thinking about each of those cards or situations that they were dealt that day. They could have chosen to ease their own anxiety. They could have been more in control of how they responded to what was happening. But they didn't know how, because no one ever teaches this stuff. And the person who felt angry because their boss snapped at them, think about this. Do you really think that their boss reached inside of their body and created the neurotransmitters or brain chemicals that produced the feeling of anger inside of that person? No, of course not. So where did the anger come from? It came from the body's response to the angry thought. And while it might seem reasonable or even normal for someone to think angry thoughts when someone else snaps at them, the unfortunate, or I guess really fortunate truth is that it is 100% their choice what they think about it and how they allow it to make them feel. They handed their boss the right to choose their own emotional experience. They gave away their power. So, if at this point you're ready to swallow the pill that your thoughts and emotions and behaviors that take you into the situations that you don't like are your choice, then I encourage you to listen on. So here are a couple more examples. It wasn't your boss who handed you the "you're fired" card. You handed yourself the "getting fired" card by slacking off at work. It wasn't the other person or God that punished you with the "getting pregnant from a one-night stand" card. You grabbed a hold of that card all on your own by choosing to have unprotected sex with a stranger. The most important truth that must be accepted in order to finally be in control of our own lives is the fact that we cause most of the cards that we're dealt. And the reason we choose to act in the way that brings about these things that we do not want is because we act based on how we feel. We feel angry that we didn't get a raise, and so we slack off at work, and we end up getting fired. We feel desperate for attention and approval and get tipsy at the bar, and it feels so good to be wanted that we let our guard down and end up with a baby with a stranger. Our emotions drive our actions. And the key here, I want you to really hear this, is that our thoughts drive our emotions. If we learn how to think differently, we can learn how to control our emotions at least more of the time. And if we are in more control of our emotions, we can more deliberately choose our behaviors. And if we choose our behaviors, we can stop choosing the ones that lead to the life circumstances that we do not want.
Visit transformationacademy.com/toolbox to download free life coaching worksheets that go with the activities discussed in this podcast, plus other resources for creating a thriving life coaching business.